Hi everyone, welcome back to the series. In the last episode, what we did, we created our sprites. We split them out into individuals and we also set up some of our UI element sprites as well. If you haven't watched that video, I really suggest you watch that one before this. This one won't make much sense without it. So in this video, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and create some prefabs so that we can use later on in games development. And by doing this, we'll also kill two birds with one stone, and we'll set up some basic animation as well. So let's dive straight into it. Okay, so what prefabs are we actually going to need to create? Well, if we jump into our Space Invaders sprite sheet, we're going to need a prefab for each of our 5 aliens. We're also going to need a prefab for the enemy bullet, a prefab for the explosion, and the friendly bullet. So let's start off by creating all 5 of our aliens. Now, as you may remember, each alien has a 2-frame animation that we can see down here. If I switch between them, we can see that we have the animation. Now, how do we go about bringing that animation into the game? Well, it's very simple. For something like this, where we're only ever going to have this one animation, what we can do, we can hold Control and select both of our sprites, and then if we drag and drop both of these into our project, we'll see that Unity is asking us to save an animation. So we jump into our animations folder, we'll create a new subfolder, and we'll just call this enemies, and inside here we will call it alien 1. So now if we just quickly play the game, we should see that our alien animates, and it does, but it's very quick. So the way that we can slow this down is if we select our alien object and go into our animator, can select alien 1, which is our only animation state for any of our aliens, and we can take this speed down to, let's try 0.25. That's more like it. And then we can go ahead and just rename our game object to alien 1. And we can go ahead and do this for 4 other aliens. So we'll select both, drag and drop them in. Alien 2. Open up our animator, and again we'll set this to 0.25. Same for alien 3. Throw in alien 4. .25, 0.25, 0.25, and 0.25. Perfect. Just jump through and rename these. Always good to have a naming convention, or just simply rename anything so it looks a little bit nicer in the inspector. So if we go ahead and play this, we should see all 5 of our sprites animating. Absolutely perfect. And there's just a couple more things that we need to do for our prefabs before we save these out. One more thing that we're going to need on here is a Box Collider 2D, and as you can see, because the sprite itself is 16 by 16 but the actual artwork inside doesn't match that, Box Collider kind of expands over where we want it. So if we come over into our inspector, edit the collider, we can then bring in this Box Collider to match our sprite. And again, what we're going to want to do, we're going to want to do exactly the same for our other 4 aliens. So now just by doing that, we should be able to detect collisions only when something collides with the sprite itself and not just inside the sprite boundaries. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and create our enemy bullet. If we do exactly the same, drag and drop that in, animations, enemy bullet, rename that, and again we'll add in a Box Collider 2D, and shape this down. Now, I'm not sure if I showed you the actual animation for this. All this is going to do when we take it down is it's just going to mirror. It's going to flip left and right just so we can see it a little bit more clearly when we're playing the game. Right there. What we could do actually, we could change that up to be, say, 0.5, just so it's not completely in step with the rest of our animations. So again, it stands out a little bit more. May have to change that again. Oh no, there we go, I've learned something new today. So apparently if you amend animation timing while in play mode, it doesn't reset in the inspector when you exit play mode. The more you know. What else have we got? So we've got our explosion as well. We can drag and drop those in. Animations. Explosion. Rename. And this time, we don't need a box collider. Let's just see how this looks. Okay, so that looks pretty okay. We don't need to mess around with the speed on that. One thing we do need to make sure though is we never want our explosion to actually loop. We only want the explosion to happen once. So if we have a look at our animations, we can see that inside of our explosion controller we have loop time. Now that's always checked by default, so if we uncheck that and we play again, we should see it plays once and stops on the final frame, which it does. And that's good enough for now. Close down our animations. Did we have any more that we needed? We don't. Okay, so now we'll just go ahead and create the rest of the game objects that don't require either being prefabs or animations. So we'll start off with the mothership. We can just bring that in and add the box collider 2D. Next up we have the player's ship. Again, we'll just bring this in, add our box collider and size this down. Now one thing that we can do to make it a little bit fairer on the player, as you can see here, because we have an oddly shaped player ship, if one of the enemy bullets was to hit this top corner here, then our player would take damage, and it's not really fair that. So what we can do, we'll bring in a box collider ever so slightly by say 1.5 pixels wide. Sorry, no we won't. We'll bring it in all the way up to the center column. And then what we can do, we can add a second box collider, which we can resize down to match our wings. So now we have this sort of cross shape, making it a lot fairer for our player if they're moving to one side and they just manage to dodge the laser. If it enters this area here, we won't take damage. Next up we have another one, the friendly bullet, and rinse and repeat. Exactly the same. I'm probably going to be fast forwarding a lot of this information because why would you need to see me resizing box colliders for an entire video? And I think finally we have our shield blocks. Now our shield blocks are going to be slightly different. We're going to make these into a prefab just so we can duplicate and copy and paste all of these very quickly. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to take in our solid block, our 0, drop that in, and we're also going to want to take in our solid right block. Now the reason I've split this up into two individual halves is later on in the tutorial, when we're actually dealing with damaging these blocks, instead of having universal damage and no matter where it hits, we take damage on the entire block, we're going to split it up so the left and the right half both have their own individual health elements. But we'll come to that when we come to that. What we're going to do, we're just going to want to make sure that both of these line up perfectly. So to do this, I'm going to center everything. When I say everything, I mean both of these blocks. And I'm going to take the right block, I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to snap that over one unit. And if everything's set up correctly, you should just be able to do that yourself as well. And the reason that works perfectly is when we set up our Space Invaders sprite sheet, we said that we wanted 16 pixels per unit. And one in-game unit is now effectively going to be one of our sprites. So if we take a look, if we go to Edit and Snap Settings, we can see that I've got my snap settings set to 1 unit for the X, Y and Z. If we just change this up to 2 for example, and then I try and hold control and bring my right side back over, we should see it'll snap over to the left, and it does. So you're going to want to make sure that your snap settings are set to 1 unit, and then everything works perfectly fine. And then finally, just to keep both of these together, we can create an empty game object. We'll call this shield, centre that position, drag and drop both our left and our right sides under the shield, and then we have an object. As we can see though, they are off centre because these weren't centred when I started. So if we bring that in, we can even, just to keep it perfectly centred, we'll set the X to a snap setting of 0.5. We'll snap our left 0.5 over and our right 0.5 over. And now our shield is its own game object. And then finally, what we can go ahead and do, any of our game objects that we want to be a prefab, we can simply click on them and drag and drop over into our prefabs folder. Now we're going to want all 5 of our aliens as prefabs. We want an enemy bullet prefab, an explosion prefab. We'll create a mothership prefab. We'll just create all as prefabs just for ease. And now that we have all these inside of our project folder, we can remove them, not the main camera, we can remove them all from our game scene. And then when we want to add them back in, we can simply drag and drop. And as you can see, because we've created it as a prefab, we already have our animator on there, we already have our box collider set up. So that'll make creating the actual enemy packs, enemy groups, a lot easier. And then very quickly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to speed this section up, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to create some more prefabs out of our pickups. Now I'm going to do this in exactly the same way by dragging and dropping all 6 of our coin animation in, animations, coin spin, add the box collider, resize, and take our animation speed down. And I'm going to do this for the health and the life as well. And then we can drag and drop these into our prefabs folder. Simple. So we're already well on our way with our game assets. In the next video, we're going to start off with a bit of scripting, and we're going to create our player's movement and shooting script. So make sure you hop on over to the next part, and I'll see you over there.